Here, I want I'm gonna play a old react to this video by Dan Calloway.
Not true, because
resolve white supremacy, we will resolve the problems of unemployment. We will resolve the problems of bad housing.
Dane Calloway or paypal.me/Dane Calloway to support me, my channel, and my content. Merchandise is now available at I'mJustHereToMakeYouThink.com.
Black America is potentially the most dangerous group of humans alive today. Dangerous to who? Dangerous to the corporate empire, Illuminati, imperial scum, whatever you want to call them, white supremacists.
White supremacy is the problem. Jews just happen to be white.
How much of the problems in the black community are the blacks' own fault?
Well, white supremacy is the main problem in our community.
How much of the problems are your own fault?
If we resolve white supremacy, we will resolve the problems of unemployment. We will resolve the problems of bad housing. The Reagan administration probably represented the epitome of white supremacy by cutting into every domestic livable program that whites and blacks had, especially poor people, and they showed their relationship with these people by proving their insensitivity. Now, Mr. Cook,
and the reason they're dangerous is because they're quite easily united. It might seem not true because there's so much division within black people in America, but the only reason they're divided is because the corporate empire spends billions of dollars keeping them divided because they are potentially dangerous.
Mr. Coakley, you've attacked Jesse Jackson, you attacked the late Mayor Harold Washington, you called them colorless. What black leaders, political leaders in this country do you respect?
Well, I think politics has a way of accommodation. I don't think we have true political leaders in the sense of that you're going to find purity in politics. Politics is about accommodation and compromise. When our black leaders go into politics, as was discussed recently in Harper's Magazine, blacks have to prove to whites that they will protect their interests first. That's why politics is not the type of game that we're going to continue to invest all our time in, because it's proven that it doesn't work. Politics will not whip white supremacy, but clear, accurate, documented challenges to white supremacy, as well as action, grassroots action, taking against the forces of white supremacy.
What makes them dangerous? Well, 45 million people.
How many? This was when?
United in the US would be very dangerous. What kind of things is dangerous? Well, you might think I'm talking about protesting or getting together and rallying and that kind of stuff. Well, no, that's not the kind of danger I'm talking about. 45 million people united could do some serious damage to the financial market. Serious damage to the financial market. Serious damage to the financial market. Serious damage.
To what market? It's not even taking that to be done right now. When you look at I told you. Y'all must got me messed up when I showed them glasses of Stevie Wonder or Ray Charles. I'm trying to tell you something else. You will know that song means something.
Damage to the financial market. Serious damage to the financial market. Serious damage to the financial market.
So I'm dark skinned with an accent. And when you had an accent back then, Africans, well, it wasn't that many Africans in America at that time. It was mostly Jamaicans. So you had an accent, you automatically.
But stop right here. This dude was in my office in Philadelphia. He had a white Lexus GS. Yeah, jokers don't play with me. Ain't nobody, jokers don't play with me. Jokers get money with me. But this ain't about that. I'm trying to tell you or show you what's going on right in front of our eyes.
Jamaican.
Right.
Africans, well, it wasn't that many Africans in America at that time. It was mostly Jamaicans.
You have to be logical. If I know that in this hotel room they have food every day, and I'm knocked on the door every day to eat, and they open the door, let me see the flowing food around, but they're telling me there's no food in here every day. I'm standing outside trying to sing my way in. We are hungry, please let us in. We are hungry, please let us in. After about a week, that song is gonna change to we hungry, we need some food. After 2-3 weeks, it's like, give me all the food, racking out the door. After a year, then you just like, I'm picking the lock, coming through the door blasting. We asked 10 years ago. We was asking with the Panthers. We was asking with them, the civil rights movement. We was asking, now those people that were asking, they're all dead and in jail. So now what do you think we're going to do?
What that was all about, the revolution will not be televised. That was about the fact that the first change that takes place is in your mind. You have to change your mind before you change the way you live and the way you move. So when we said that the revolution will not be televised, we were saying that, like, the thing that's going to change people is something that no one will ever be able to capture on film. It'll just be something that you see, and all of a sudden you realize, I'm on the wrong page, or I'm on the right page, but I'm on the wrong note. And I've got to get in sync with everyone else to understand what's happening in this country.
In today's society of America, millions of people of all complexions are still undergoing the effects of a variety of dominant social engineering experiments.
Right. Too busy thinking about my baby.
Which just so happens to play a prominent role among their everyday lives unknowingly. Not only that, there are in fact particular prominent groups of people that has set the mandatory rules and regulations that all American citizens must abide by, still to this very day. And when it specifically comes to the so-called African Americans, or rather the descendants of the copper-colored indigenous people who occupied all of the now American lands pre-colonial times, the experimental methodologies are deeply rooted, especially physically and mentally, by way of things such as industrialism, environmental racism, compulsory education, manipulative indoctrination, paper genocide, as industrialism, environmental racism.
Look at the thumbnail and remember 2023. What you see right there, that's the same thing. Look at the degrees. Shout out to Hop. Look at the degrees. I ain't showing you the whole picture, but that's in Elkins Park on 6/7/2023. We had the same thing happen. A strong dust and all of this shit came from Canada. And then our mayor went on TV today and told us, it's environmental drone coming, like it's coming through. And she said, stay inside especially those who have chronic diseases like I had. I told a judge this 3 fucking years ago. I told a judge the same shit, gave him the same. Look, I made it easy for him. All he had to do was click the link, and he would have seen that day. And this is the judgment of them attorneys that sat on that arbitration board. And knowing you represented me before, then you try to take property. You did take property, and you're gonna pay for it. I'm telling y'all, I make them pay. Yeah, you look at us like we monkeys or some shit like that. Nah, everybody ain't dumb, but it's just how you handle things.
Compulsory education, manipulative indoctrination, paper genocide, and eugenics. However, I would like for you to note that the freedom of having life is like a seed. It cannot grow on its own and become a plant unless the climate changes environmentally. Now, many of you can recall hearing the phrase, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it." And I agree with it to a certain extent, because even though you may be doing great right now, you should always make room for improvements, or rather changes, because it's better to be prepared than repaired after the damage is already done. Which brings me to my very first point of this segment, and that is, why are people of color in America considered to be the biggest threat throughout American society? Now, this question alone would be continuously answered throughout this video and my other correlating documentaries, because of how much detailed information is critically important to note when answering this question. This threat can be traced all the way back to the late 1700s in
1700s. I'm showing you Ancestry.com, and I'm showing you my family. Right here, this one in my family. I'm my family. Yeah, I'm a receipt. Yeah, my daughter, my daughter is a receipt. Yeah, we all receipts. But then some of us are leaders, some followers, some workers. Yeah, I don't know. We don't know nothing over here.
very early 1800s, at a time when white African and European colonizationalists, or rather kidnappers, were afraid of the threat of being murdered by the so-called coloreds, or rather the indigenous people of North America, due to the multiple Indian raids, rebellions, documented and undocumented wars rapidly occurring during this time period. This is also the very same time period where these kidnappers demanded that the Negroes be removed from the lands of America and shipped away to newly established American colonized lands in Africa along the coast. Multiple religious societies campaigned for this idea to become a reality, especially the Catholics and the Quakers, just to name a few. But the ball began to roll once John Lynch wrote a letter to the president.
The what? He said when the ball...
According to records held by the National Archives, in a letter to then former President Thomas Jefferson, dated December 25th, 1810, John Lynch, who colonized lands he named after himself called Lynchburg, Virginia, made a descriptive proposition to Thomas Jefferson that called for the, quote, colonization of the nigger people on the coast of Africa, so that a settlement can be established for immigrating the freed people of color out of North America and into Africa somewhere along the coast. In my documentary called African American Slaves in West Africa, History Books Are Lying, Part 2, I shared much detailed, informative information in relation to what really happened in American history. I exposed that we were all led to believe that our ancestors were stolen from parts of West Africa and then shipped to the Americas, when in reality, that information was told to us all in reverse. Some of our ancestors were forcefully relocated from southern east lands of North America to lands west of the Mississippi River, and also along the coast of Africa, and especially South and West Africa. I highly recommend that you watch that video, for it is critically important for the sake of our real documented history. Now, another side of this threat would be allowing the people of color to think freely. Being as though English was not our ancestors' original language to begin with, the early European and African colonizationalists implemented.
Where this at? Where this at? Yo, y'all ever seen this place? Even though that's written, I seen this place. It's right here in Philly. Go on a tour. Yeah, you go on a tour right on the jaw. Yeah, they take you right through the old courtrooms. Yeah, that's when they wore wigs and everything and all that stuff. Yeah, they go right. Yeah, they take you through a tour right through all that. Boom, bang, bang, left. No. I ain't no tour guide. I ain't none of that shit. I ain't nothing. I don't know nothing. I don't know. But I've been in them courtrooms right here in Philly.
Manipulative methods to force their own traditions, language, and cultures, just to name a few, upon our ancestors mentally, which in turn rapidly obstructed our ancestors' well-being physically, systematically. This method was also purposely designed to decimate their literacy and critical thinking capabilities, along with quelling the thoughts of retaliation by fear-mongering, allowing for this social engineering format of eugenics to prevail from generation to generation, affecting only those who are forcefully under the spell of its digested forms of slavery, or rather oppression, under the mysterious provisions and racist ideologies of white supremacy.
At first day. So I asked my students, okay, what happened during Reconstruction right after the what went on there? And what happened to me was an aha reaction, or I might better call it a no reaction, because 16 out of my 17 students said to me, that's the time when, right after the Civil War, Reconstruction, blacks took over the government of the southern states, but they were too soon out of slavery, and so they screwed up, and white folks had to take control again.
Birth of a Nation,
Exactly.
the 1903 movie. As
Birth of a Nation, Gone with the Wind, all rolled into one.
Birth of a Nation, Gone with the Wind, all rolled into one.
And of course, these are all African American students. I thought, my gosh, what must it do to you to believe that the one time your group was center stage in American history, they screwed up? Now, it'd be a different matter if this happened, but it didn't happen.
What'd he say? But it didn't happen. I don't know the boss. I don't know this dude. He said it didn't happen. Everybody wake up at their own time. You know. What you concerned about? No, mind your fucking business, because The money actually talks. Yeah, it's telling you something on the money, and you know when you on the money. You'll know if you know how to read the money. Or the screen.
their not so prosperous small to medium-sized businesses. So the Civil War began in April 1861. Originally named my documentary about this, the American activist named Frederick Douglass was able to contribute, quote, tens of thousands of dollars of his own money in order to save the abolishment of all 37 branches of the Freedmen Savings and Trust Banks that were created by law through then President Abraham Lincoln on March 3rd, 1865. And before I state that reason, I want you to note the timeline here. The Civil War began on April 12, 1861, in which history states So the Civil War began in April 1861 and completed in May of 1865. Before the Civil War ended, some very important key factors occurred within this timeline. For example, see, that manipulative lie was told to you as a fear-mongering tactic in order to depict that one race of people are somehow superior to others. Free whites that immigrated to America from Africa and Europe during the early 1800s.
Which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. Which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor.
The Homestead Act of 1862 granted these white peasants, as King describes, our lands that were stripped from our indigenous ancestors and all of the specialized benefits the federal government promised our ancestors by peace treaties that they would receive for being 90% of the help they needed in order for the United States to win all 61 documented wars that occurred during the 1800s alone. Side note, the Emancipation Proclamation abolished all forms of slavery the very next year in 1863. The so-called free Negroes and the so-called freed Negroes, along with the so-called freedmen, were royally upset and disgusted with the federal government. So they continued the multiple rebellions until they saw change. The Homestead Act of 1866 was established by the government that allowed the Negro 40 acres and a mule. But the catch was that the Negro had to buy the land, and the price of the lands were lowered just enough so that the Negro cannot afford it still. This is what King meant by America refused to give the Negro any land. These Homestead Acts gave these foreigners government-funded assistance, where the government hired our ancestors to teach these foreigners how to farm.
Now, with government money to teach them how to farm.
Because keep in mind, a true foreigner or immigrant wouldn't know how to grow anything in a mass area of land that they are not accustomed with or never inhabited before in their life. This is why King stated our farms.
They provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms.
Okay, so now, this timeline that I'm referring to begins with the Civil War in April 1861. Then, the first official Homestead Act of 1862. Then, the very next year, the Emancipation Proclamation Bill was implemented into law in 1863, in which that bill alone had absolutely nothing to do with freeing slaves from chains and shackles, like how history so loves to claim. No, in fact, the word emancipate derives from the Latin word emancipatus, which is the process of being set free from legal, social, or political restrictions, which has nothing to do with enslavement. In fact, the Latin word for civil is civilis, which means to affect fellow citizens in a legal or political sense. In other words, the stories of slavery in the Americas did not happen the way we were originally taught by authors of American history and world history. Because once an individual literally researches their family's genealogical background by records, instead of taking the word from some self-proclaimed scholars within their own communities with absolutely no publicly verifiable evidence to manifest, they will be met with the truth that these so-called slaves in America were actually prisoners of war who were contracted as indigent servants by way of industrialism, which also means that your ancestors were sharecroppers, being as though they were the original landowners who were contracted by the tenants, or rather the white colonizationalists who immigrated to North America from Africa and Europe, in which these tenants were allowed to use the sharecroppers' land by contract or treaty in return for a share of the crops produced on the sharecroppers' very own land. But this deal went bad, obviously due to a particular group of people that had a totally different hidden agenda in mind. The next part of this timeline would be President Abraham Lincoln crafting the 40 Acres and a Mule Field Action 15 in Savannah, Georgia, for the so-called Negro sharecroppers during the months of January and February in the year of 1865, which should immediately indicate to you that the Lincoln administration was willing to work out multiple other economic deals with the complaining indigenous people of North America who were rebelling and raiding multiple territories at this time due to being betrayed and undervalued by both the local and federal governments. So the very next month, in March of 1865, Lincoln was sure to create federal banks for the so-called freedmen that fought on both sides of
What I tell you before? Now, I don't know nothing about gangs. I don't know nothing about nothing. You hear? You hear me on the mic, bro? I don't know nothing. Yeah, y'all been through all my fucking pictures. You see my grandmother laying up there on the bed dying. Then I show you records.
of the American Civil War, along with their descendants. These banks are known as the Freedmen's Savings and Trust Banks.
What day? March 3rd, 1865. Freedmen's Savings and Trust Company. Do you see Inc? Thing like that? LLC.
Or the Freedmen's Banks for short, in which over 72,000 accounts were opened, which led these banks to raise a staggering $52 million at that time, which is equivalent to over $100 billion right now, making it the largest grossing bank in American history. At that time. Then, the very next month came, and President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated on April 15th, 1865.
What?
Which forced Frederick Douglass to take over the Freedmen's Banks, using tens of thousands of his own sharecropping money, which was a lot of money at that time due to him being a businessman of color, just like millions of our ancestors were. Then, in the year of 1875, after much demand economically, along with well-respected hard work continued to manifest by way of the indigenous aboriginals of this land, Congress passed the first ever civil rights bill in American history, allowing for the white immigrants to go into business with the indigenous businessmen and women of America. Our ancestors were prospering so well that a surge of newly established businesses and banks were rapidly changing the economy on a daily basis. And it also outnumbered the amount of banks owned and operated by whites. This time was uncommonly known as the beginning stages of the civil rights movement, to a point where businesses owned by people of color went from about 3,000 to nearly 60,000 businesses. And the people of color that owned banks went from about 30.
Homeowners 60 plus file these 5 docs before it's too late. It's been too late. Fuck that. Look at this. Look, let's say USA right now. 1 month ago, man. 1 month ago, it was a fucking emergency. Fuck out of here.
5 banks to nearly 150 banks nationwide from the years of 1875 all the way until the year of 1934, according to the FDIC and the Federal Reserve.
So my grandmother, yeah, she was born in 1933.
Reserve. Now, So many important events occurred in the year of 1934 alone that I will have to save it for part 2 of this segment. However, I would like for you to note that people would love to claim that the place called Africa has the most resources ever in history. But if that is the actual truth, then why do you consistently see real Africans immigrating to North America?
Black Seminole. Worse.
To work at a job or to open up their own business and collect resources from here in America, then publicly inform their friends, colleagues, and coworkers that they are doing this all in order to send it all back to their families who are residing in Africa, literally. See, the answer to that question is very simple. Because in today's society, the one set group of people who unknowingly accumulates all of the wealth upon this nation that keeps this country running in the first place, but would immediately spread its wealth to everyone under the sun other than themselves, which in turn attracts national and international businesses to their pockets alone, are in fact the so-called African Americans of this country today. Which in turn leads you to now know the truth about why multiple economic records would state every single year that so-called African Americans would make up around 1% of America's wealth overall, purposely telling you the story in reverse in order to hide the truth, making that the real reason why African Americans, or rather the indigenous aboriginals of Turtle Island, are the biggest threat to America's society, but they just don't know it yet. I'm just here to make you think.
Don't let that go over your head.